Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah. Now, why is these heathens and these Edomites mad? And the Christians? When you go to Psalms chapter 2, it say, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? Psalms 2 verse 2 say, the kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, verse 3, let us break their, not just Yahweh, who they ignorantly call Jesus Christ, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. And see, that goes along with Psalms 83. Psalms 83, starting at verse 2. It say, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult or a trap, and they that hate you have lifted up the head. Verse 3, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden one. Verse 4, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Salakia. Verse 5 in Psalms 83, it says, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. Now verse 6 explains these heathen nations. That's against the nation of Israel. The tabernacle or the house of Edom, or the nation of Edom, and the nation of Ishmaelites, and the nation of Moab, and the nation of Hagarim. And it goes on to spell out all the rest. But you see, it started with Edom in verse 6. And they have came together, and they're mad that God chose us as a nation to be the kings and priests. You see, that's what's the problem is. Esau is mad about the birthright, but all the other nations is mad that God chose us to be kings and priests over them. Because when you go to the chapter previous to that, it tells you how deep it is. In Psalms 82 verse 6, he said, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. You see, they understand the depth of this thing. Verse 8 say, arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations. You see, they know that they gonna be our inheritance. And they mad as hell about that situation. That situation is not sitting right with them. And you know, we got the Christians always eavesdropping. So we have to hit them with Salakia, Peter. We got to go to Peter, because Yahushua told Peter to feed his sheep when he left. He said, Peter, feed the sheep. Told him three times, do you love me? And if you love me, feed my sheep. Give them what they need while you alive, so they can have what they need. And so in Peter, he reiterated the situation that we dealing with, and he made it real simple. Now Hebrews is the same thing. It's the same thing in Hebrews. He let them know that ain't too much change. Now let's go to is it 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. It says, but ye are a chosen generation, That means a chosen family, a royal priesthood. You see, kings and priests, and holy nation. That's one nation, the nation of Israel. Peter is letting them know, a peculiar people. Nobody else is like this nation. It say that ye shall show forth the praises of him who have called you out of the darkness into his marvelous light. And so this is why the heathen is rage. This is why the red dragon is mad. Because they don't want us to be the kings and priests over them. They don't want to be in submission to us. And he made it simple. Peter made it very simple. He's talking about one generation, and when you go into the Greek, that generation is talking about a family, a bloodline. It's not talking about no freaking religion. And then so we're gonna take it to Revelation. Let's take it to Revelation and get deep down into the situation. Revelation gonna let you know. Let's see here. Revelations chapter 2. Going in Revelation chapter 2. We're gonna start at 25. But that which ye have already hold fast till I come. 26. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. 27. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers. Now we go back to Psalms. When we go back to Psalms chapter 2, this is exactly what is being restated. You see, why is the heathen raging? Because that is what came after that in Psalm chapter 2, and starting at verse 8. As for me, and I shall give thee the heathen for your inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Verse 9. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So this is the reason that the heathen is enraged. They are mad that they have to be under submission to the 12 tribes of Israel. They are angry about these things. But in this time period, they wasn't in submission. You see, they was imagining this vain thought that the children of Israel was going to be in submission to them for a long period of time. And that's not what's the case. When you go to Jeremiah 30:16, it say, therefore all that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. You see, these nations and heathens is going to go into captivity. They imagining a vain thing, thinking that the children of Israel, God's chosen people, was going to be under submission to them, in submission to them, for the rest of the existence. And it's not going to happen. When you go to Isaiah, take it to Isaiah, he's going to reiterate the statement starting at verse 14. Isaiah say in chapter 14 verse 20, say, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel. That when they use that word yet, it's almost saying yet again, and yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. That's the end of the story. That means he gonna choose Israelites and set them in their own land, man. And once they go back to that Holy Land, it's a wrap. But he said, and the stranger shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Verse 2, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord. Possess them. How are they going to possess them in the land of the Lord? For servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captive, slaves, whose captives or slaves they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. See, that's why the heathen is enraged. That's why the heathen is mad. That's why these Christians is mad. Because they don't have the understanding, and not only don't they have the understanding that they wasn't the ones that was chosen to be rulers over the earth, especially the ones that's not a part of the nation of Israel. These so-called Christians who try to graft themselves into the nation of Israel blessing, they mad as heck. They are enraged. And so Yahweh, who they ignorantly called Jesus Christ, gave him a grand finale. When you go to Revelation 13, he gave him a grand finale, knockout Mike Tyson punch. In Revelation 13, starting at verse 9, if any man have an ear, let him hear. Verse 10, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So these individuals know that they are going into slavery, they is going into captivity, and the heathen is really raging now. Because now it's being preached in the four quarters of the earth. And plus they can see that the prophecies is coming to pass. The 400 years where he had the nation in Egypt, it's almost a mirror of what's going on here in America. 400 years passed and all heck broke loose on the streets. All heck broke loose with the prophecies. All heck broke loose with the prophets on the corner preaching the true word and the true understanding. So when you go to Joel, let's get this Ezekiel right quick. Let's get this Ezekiel. This Ezekiel. Because Ezekiel just sounds so wonderful, it sounds so beautiful. Ezekiel chapter 28 and 25. He said, thus saith the Lord God, this is Ezekiel 28:25, when I shall have gathered the house of Israel from the people among whom they are scattered, and shall be sanctified in them in the sight of the heathen. See, the heathen know they finna see this thing. It's gonna be right where they can see it. Then shall they dwell in their land that I have given to my servant Jacob. You see, the heathen is gonna see the Israelites go back to their homeland and rule with a rod of iron. And they are mad as hell. And especially these Christians that thought they was gonna have some hope. It was gonna be some kind of hope for them. And they didn't understand it's a recompense coming. Now, Joel chapter 3, he let them know. He let them know in verse 2, he said he gonna gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and he gonna plead with them for his people and for his inheritance Israel, whom they scattered among the nations and parted the land. Verse 3 say they cast lots for his people and gave boy for a harlot, sold little boys for prostitutes, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. Then he named the nation that did these things, and in verse 6 he said, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. And then he let them know, you put them in captivity. But in verse 7 he said, Behold, I will raise them up out of the place whether you have sold them. So wherever you sold them, I'm going to raise them up out of there. I'm going to take them up out of there. And will return your recompense upon your head. That's another reason they're enraged. They going to get double. Not only is they going to get the recompense, it's going to be double. In verse 8 it says, and I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabaeans, to a people far off, for the Lord hath spoken it. So the heathen is at rage. They mad. They can't contain their feelings. You see, because they understand that they got to go into slavery. They making movies and talking about the Negroes and who was in slavery, and they thought it just was a situation that happened. Even though the Catholic Church planned the whole thing with all of these papal bull decrees that they made, but these heathens is coming to the realization that we got to go into captivity. We got to go into captivity for what we did to the children of Israel. And they seeing the so-called UFOs flying in the sky, and they getting enraged every time they think about it. Now you go to Amos, it backs up Joel. 16. Amos backs up Joel. Amos chapter 1 verse 9. It talks about these so-called Hamites, or Africans as we call them today, delivered up the whole nation of Edom. The whole nation of Israel to the nation of Edom. So he said he sold them to the Grecians in Joel, but in Amos it let you know exactly who these Grecians was. These Grecians were the nation of Edom, the Edomites. So he let people know exactly what's going on and who gonna get punished for selling the children of Israel. Now all the heathens is gonna be under submission, but it's a special punishment for the Edomites and these Hamites. It's gonna be a special punishment. It's gonna be a special punishment for the Ishmaelites. You see, cause they carried a whole. In verse 6, it tells how they took the Israelites and gave them to the nation of Edom. These red dragons. So that's why the heathen is raising, because they know they're going into captivity, and because they put God's people into captivity. So they are mad, and they mad as heck. But I'm going to leave it there. All praise to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Hashem, Kakadash, double honor to the elders, pushing the truth worldwide. Peace to the elect worldwide. The kingdom is at hand. Shalom.